Hello, welcome to the painting with commentary video for the D&D Collector Series Tyrannosaurus Zombie. I'm GMA Tank, and let's get into this. So this is a great model from Gale Force 9. There was a limited quantity of them made, 1,500. It's a hard plastic. I'm not used to working with models like this that require assembly. I prefer the Norzels models, and I don't do much Warhammer, but I'm getting the hang of it. So here are the pieces out of the box. Nice bubble wrapped each one for safety. Gorilla Glue is what I use. I tried to use model glue like from Games Workshop, but I don't have any accelerant and it didn't seem to stick very well. I hold it for like a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, it still wouldn't be bonded. So I gotta get me some accelerant, and for now, this Gorilla Glue did the job. As you can see, held it for, I didn't videotape myself holding it, but you know, a good 30 seconds of firm pressure, and it was tacky enough that I could leave it to cure. In this piece, the leg, I had to trim some more of the side to make a better fit, and I did that, and on she goes. Tail, a little bit of a trim, figuring out which way it goes on. There it is, the two arms, and that was it. So, liquid green stuff. Whenever you assemble a model like this, or maybe not all the time, but at least for me, there were some pretty big seams. I put it on in a position so that I would be able to put it on the base and have the feet line up with the marks on the base where it needed to be. You can use other things for this. People use all kinds of different stuff. I usually use MILITARIUM for building sculptures. You can see the tail hole and filling. But I use liquid green stuff. I always have. We all use our own things, and some of you are probably better painters than me. Personally though, liquid green stuff, a little bit of water on your finger just to help smooth it out. This particular model, it was very forgiving because any of the parts that I had overkilled wasn't the end of the world. Because it's got a bunch of damage and scars and scrapes anyways. So there's that. So now we can see he's all put together. He's been primed. I use a Chaos Black primer with a zenithal coat of white as well, so that you can see all those nice details. I'm using Screamer Pink here, or Screaming Pink, whatever was just up there. My plan for this was to hit all these little gouges and wounds. I didn't want to do red. You know, it's dead. It wouldn't look very red. It should have even been a little more brown than this pink, I'm sure. But so I hit all these particular gouges with the pink. You can see kind of fast tracking through the video here because there are a lot of them. Put the paint on thin and let the brush do all the work. Let it settle in all the recesses. So because this is a zombie, I didn't want it to just be pink and bloody. There was a great opportunity to do lots of gore on this model, and I'm sure some have. But this looks rotten to me. It doesn't look like it was just killed yesterday. So I thought I would put some MILITARIUM green contrast paint in addition to the Screamer Pink, which we're going to get to. You can see under his crotch area there the green from my green stuff, which is dried. Obviously I didn't get the primer much coverage on that. That's okay though, because by the time this guy is finished, you won't see that anymore, and all of his seams have been covered. There's a couple, and again, a very forgiving model for it. There was a couple spots where there's still a small crack, but you could, it looks like part of the model. So move on to that green I was talking about. MILITARIUM green. See, I was trying to give that pink a sort of browny look by adding the green to it. Kind of makes it look, or I thought at least, like rotten. And it kind of did. I shared that picture on Instagram midway through the week when I had painted it. But you can skip this step because when everything was said and done, ultimately with what I did with the blood, this was kind of lost. So there's that. So Screaming Skull was the bone color of choice. I always like using Morghast bone, but I like to spread it out amongst different paints, and I have, just to keep your supplies going. Anywhere where there's exposed bone, these wonderful looking vertebrae sticking out of his exposed back, you could touch those with that Screaming Skull. The jaw and the ribs. One of the things about his jawline, I decided to paint some bone, even though you could have painted flesh right up to the top. I wanted to expose more bone, and even though there's no delineation with the model, the paint does the work, and I think it looked really cool in the finished job. So hit those ribs with that skull, Screaming Skull. Anywhere where there's bone, take your time, look, you'll find more. And there it is. Alright, so next on to his hide. This is a WYLDWOOD, it's a contrast paint. I wanted a dark undercoat for my skin, You can see the bone exposed that I was talking about earlier on his nose, which definitely was designed to be exposed, but his jaw as well, where I painted bone when it could have been hide, just to make more of the skull exposed, and again the rot. So this Wildwood contrast paint is really dark, but I'm just painting it right onto my contrast, and I plan to dry brush this quite extensively, so I wanted a good brown undercoat. The thing with contrast paints I find is when you're painting them, don't go over the same areas you've already gone over. You know, paint a bit, let it move on to, let's paint some and move on to another area. Let it do its work. If you keep touching it, you're going to disturb it while it tries to dry, and that's not going to be as good. So paint an area, move on to somewhere else. Obviously, you want to spread it out nicely so it doesn't leave globs or pools of dye where you don't want it to be too dark. But once you put it down, move on and let the paint do the job. Again, it's a subtle effect here because the dinosaur is so dark, but ultimately it's the base coat that I needed to do this dry brushing, which is going to start in the next scene here. So the first dry brush paint we used was SYLVANETH bark. It's a great dry brush paint to have. It's that kind of tanny brown. And again, heavy on the brush, wipe it off on the cloth or your hand in my case, and just give some left, right, left, right, left, right swaths. We're really trying, there's tons of those details. Okay, now remember all that pink work that I did, it's still on there, it's just kind of harder to see with the Wildwood now beside it because it was light, and we're planning to go back to those. So right now though, what I want is to make that look like hide, dinosaur hide, not black, brown poop. So with this SYLVANETH bark, you can see those details are starting to pop. And because I thought that it needed another element of color in the skin because it was a little too, now you have like the yin and the yang. You got the Wildwood, the dark, you got the SYLVANETH, which is the light. I wanted another color brown in there, so I'm about to use another dry brush effect on this bad boy. Here it comes! GOLGFAG brown. Now this looks really orange, and it is, but when it dries, it darkens up a bit into a little more of a brown, or I don't know if it's pulling some of the under there. When I started this, I was like, oh no, I've ruined it. But you know what? That's the beautiful thing about this hobby. You'll never ruin it. Trust me. Even if you do something that as you're doing it, you say, okay, I ruined it. Learn from the mistake. If it is a mistake, perhaps maybe it's just your own take on something. It doesn't have to be exactly the way it looks in Hollywood or exactly the way it looks on the box. In my case, my T-Rex looks a little orange right now, and I said, to hell with it, I'm going to just commit, and I did. I went over that whole goddamn thing again, and as you can see, now I've got two browns contrasting with the Wildwood, and I'm no color surgeon, but I love my end result, so obviously I did something right. So there it is. Next up on the docket, Skeleton Horde. It's a nice contrast paint, it's great for bone. Morghast bone or any type of light cream color for a bone layer first, as I did with this Screaming Skull, and a coat of this on there. Again, see, I'm just kind of putting some on and moving on to another area. Don't keep touching the same area when it's wet. Let it sit, let it soak, let it dry, and do the work. Anywhere where there's bone, hit it with this Skeleton Horde. When that dries, that looks like right out of a museum. And I like that. And there's some more in his tail. Those ribs, nice. We're going to do his eye next. Now the eye is an Apothecary white. Just take your time. It's tiny. It's a small detail. Make that Apothecary or contrast. You don't just want it to be white. I want it to have a 3D effect. Alright. So, blood for the blood god. Now I've got all that Screamer pink on there, which is kind of hard to see from this angle. You can kind of see it's all blended in. I'm not doing gore for gore's sake, folks. I don't want this thing to be bleeding all over the case. This thing's been dead for a long time. What I'm looking at is, if you imagine a bowl-shaped hole where this Screamer pink was, I'm just outlining almost like a layer. I'm cupping the bowl. I'm doing the top part of the bowl, just so it sort of has this two-tone. Some of it is the flat with the MILITARIUM green, and some of it's still red, like there's some dried blood in there. Also, the blood for the blood god, I'm sure you guys all know, dries in a wicked, bloody, glossy look. It looks sick, and I was looking for that too. So then as I continued, I realized, okay, So if I'm going to have those bloody patches, let's get some LIQUITEX medium gloss on here. I mixed it with a little bit of water, and anywhere I wanted it to look moist, ASMR. Anywhere I wanted it to look damp, moist, wet, still putrefaction, whatever, I touched it with this. And not everywhere, and certainly not on his skin. The skin should be dry and out. It's a bit on the bone, a bit on the exposed blood, a bit on the scalp, you know what I mean? That's going to dry into a nice glossy mess. Now to the base. A nice MOURNFANG brown, poo brown as my kid calls it. This is a super simple base. I didn't go too crazy with it, but we got some cool tricks up our sleeve. So we start with the MOURNFANG brown, and then we're going to move on to some dry brushing. So there, no, not yet, sorry. MECHANICUS standard gray. So there are some stones jutting out of that thing. You can see them all over the place. I'm just going to color them brown because, you know, anywhere in the wild where there's dirt, there's likely stone underneath. I mean, eventually you're going to hit rock. And in this case, all those jutted, hard-lined right angles were stones to me. So I went ahead and painted them gray, and then I dry brushed them. And I dry brushed them with a weird color. Instead of using like Longbeard gray like I normally would, I used Terminus stone, which is kind of like a beigey yellow. You can see it looks a little weird with that gray. Normally with a gray you would use a Longbeard gray or something more white because it looks like a limestone. But I didn't want that. I went with this yellower kind of Terminus stone. And when they dried, I was really happy with it. It gives the stone almost like a sandstone look. And Niblet green, okay, I'm going to take back that comment. It's not a sandstone, but it looks like a stone that's not your typical limestone because it's in the jungle. Niblet green on top of the MOURNFANG brown, because anywhere where the cover doesn't work, I want it to show as green underneath and not, you know, not. So some of my world famous tasty white glue mixed with water because it really got a lot to cover and I didn't want it to be lumpy. So I put this everywhere, trying not to hit those stones, and also you see the dinosaur footprints there where I'm gluing them in there. I certainly don't want to put this fake grass inside the footprints where I'm going to have to glue this guy in later. So put it all over there, get my trusty bowl, battlefield grass from Army Painter, dose it on there, and you are good. Now this base has a little bit more to it, but here's the fun part in the video. Hot glue, baby. So, I'll pause this real quick so I can talk a bit. I glued this guy to the base. That's when I realized, dang, wouldn't it be cool if he had some guts hanging out of him, okay? And that's when I did that. But he was already glued to the base. So, if you guys are planning to do this, do your guts before you glue in the base. You can get way more intricate. Okay, so as you can see in this shot, I was able to get the glue gun in there. There it is from the angle. Luckily, because he was real low riding. Okay, so we got those glue strands, no, not the thin ones, but make them look ropey. You know, basically what you're doing is you're putting a big glob on, like a circle or a bead, letting it chill there for a while, and then once it's almost hard, pump a little bit more in that bead and work your way out from there. That's what you want to kind of go for. Okay, and then, of course, some of it should land on the ground because he's dripping. So I put a couple more beads of glue on the ground. And then I followed them up with some behind him. And then paint to taste. If you want them to look intestinal, if you want them to look bloody, there you go. And then I finished off the base with some tufts. Okay, you can see that beautiful blood color there. So, woodland tufts and jungle tufts. Those are the tufts that I used. And also, I have some little plastic trees from a fish tank that were fun. Haha, fake plastic trees. That's funny. So there they are. They look, I mean, I'm not insinuating this dinosaur is bigger than a tree. They look like jungle plants, and I didn't have much more else for the base. So some jungle tufts with some woodland tufts around the base. And that, my friends, is a Tyrannosaurus Zombie. With nice gashes and a Freddy Krueger look, and he's looking right at you now. He's going, "Sup, peeps?" Some black in there. Yeah. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this painting commentary video. As always, if you have any questions, please let me know in the comments below. Also, if you have any feedback for me about how I run these videos, if you want them to be a little longer, I mean, I have 45 minutes of footage, but I round it down because no one wants to sit through that. I mean, even if you're sitting on the toilet, you're only going to be there for 10 minutes tops before your boss starts to look for you. So, nevertheless, I'm GMA Tank. I hope you guys are all having a great day, staying safe, wash your hands, and we'll talk to you later.